What's going on, everyone? About 68% of the S&P 500 closed up in the green today, even though it doesn't really look like it on the heat map. As we could see, there were a handful of stocks not only in the red, but pretty decently in the red, especially Tesla, Nvidia, AVGO, and of course, CrowdStrike, which we'll talk about definitely in today's video, but we're getting to that time of the week where things are really starting to get exciting as we have some giant earnings reports to cover. Microsoft, AMD, Starbucks, and a lot of other companies reported after the bell today, and things are starting to get pretty exciting. So, Tom, let's not waste any time and let's get right to it.
Yeah, the overall market was pretty rough today. As you can see, the SPY hit resistance around 547, 548, ended up tanking back to the downside again. It's been trying to test that resistance all week, and now we're right back at support, Mike. And I know that you mentioned that there's a few earnings here, and I think that the earnings, and of course Jerome Powell speaking tomorrow as well, will give us a big insight into which direction we're going to be breaking here. I'm really watching that support in the short term, and Microsoft is not helping anything here for the support buyers, so to say. So it looks like Microsoft actually had pretty good earnings. Whenever you look through it, they beat on EPS, they beat on revenue. Now, it wasn't like they beat by a ton or anything, but it was still pretty good numbers there. Revenue from their cloud services grew 29% over the quarter, which is nice, but it was just under the CNBC expectation of 31%. So I don't know, Mike. You know, the overall earnings look pretty good. There's maybe one little bleak spot here, but overall, I did like the Microsoft earnings. But the market is having a pretty negative reaction, which with how much weighting Microsoft has in the SPY, that's going to be a very big deal for tomorrow.
No doubt about that. And just like you said, you know, Microsoft had some pretty good earnings. And like the worst thing that you could say people are cherry picking from Microsoft right now is that their cloud services business grew by 29% instead of 31%. And that's the main reason the stock is falling in after hours. So it just goes to show you how you could have pretty good earnings and still have a falling stock. And the thing is, when you are Microsoft, which is currently the heaviest weighted company in the entire S&P 500, unfortunately, you know, if some investors don't like your earnings report for the day, that also has a pretty big impact on the overall market, just like you said, Tom. So I thought that was very interesting, and it will definitely have a big effect going into the market for tomorrow, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. But as we all know, Microsoft surely wasn't the only big company that reported today.
Yeah, they definitely aren't. The other is AMD, and then, of course, Starbucks, which we'll talk about in a minute. But AMD is the other big tech stock in the chip sector, and AMD is actually moving up pretty well on their report. And I thought that AMD had a fantastic report, Mike. So if we start to scroll through some of the headlines here, something that I really liked was that obviously they're trying to take market share away with some of their new chips. That's going to be a big thing to try to steal that away from NVIDIA. That's one of the big reasons why they're moving. And as well, Mike, as 115% year-over-year growth in their data center segment, which is pretty much their AI chip sales. So I really like this, Mike. Overall, they have some great growth. They beat on EPS. They beat on revenue. Again, it didn't beat by a ton or anything like that, but whenever you have 115% growth in some segments, that's amazing, right? Especially in such a huge influential segment like the AI chip segment, or what they call their data center segment, for anyone who doesn't understand that.
Exactly. And looking at AMD and after hours, they're moving up in a strong way. So that kind of counteracts some of the negativity that Microsoft had. But just between these two stocks, the market definitely took a hit, as we could see by SPY in after hours. And that definitely is worth noting going into not only tomorrow, but even throughout the rest of this week as other big tech companies are set to report. But as you said just a minute ago, there was another highly anticipated earnings report today, and that was with Starbucks. For those of you who don't know, Starbucks has been taking quite the beating over the past couple months, and a lot of people were looking to see a turnaround this quarter for the company, and it wasn't as good as some people might have hoped for, but their stock is moving to the upside in after hours. So their revenue missed, and their earnings per share or profit was right at expectations. One concerning thing I saw was that their same-store sales are down 3%, and one reason that this is somewhat concerning for me is because as we look at Starbucks or any other, I guess you could say, company like that, you can grow your revenue just by opening more stores. And if we go to the bottom of this article, we can see Starbucks actually opened up 526 net new stores in the quarter. But when you look at just revenue, it doesn't tell you the full story because, again, you can just open up a bunch of new stores and grow revenue that way. Whereas when you look at same-store sales, that shows you if, on average, like, each store is actually seeing an increase in revenue or not. And it's not happening right now. It's actually declining, which again is a little bit concerning. But as we look at the whole situation with Starbucks, I think there was not very highly anticipated or not very bullish expectations going into this earnings report, so that like the earnings were just not as bad as everyone was expecting, and that kind of gave everyone like an excuse to bid up the stock. And we could have also seen some short covering into this move. But as we look at Starbucks right now, it was nice to see the stock hold up after this earnings report, but it's certainly not like a great earnings report to the point where I think it's like super bullish.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this with McDonald's the other day as well. That's another stock that didn't have the best report, and look at it over the past couple days, right? And Mike, I don't know about you, but I also feel like that we're still kind of seeing a rotation into some of these like more value companies, like McDonald's, Starbucks, maybe some companies like that. These actually have pretty weak correlation to the SPY, which is pretty important to know. Starbucks has a strong negative correlation, actually, negative 0.78 on our chart down there at the bottom right. But nonetheless, it's kind of weird to see them moving up, right? We have Microsoft with some pretty good earnings. They're dropping. And then we got Starbucks with some not the best earnings, and they're flying up, right? You got to love that paradox in the earnings calendar, right? Every single time that there's earnings, Mike, this always blows people's minds the most here when these happen.
Yep, and speaking of earnings, Tom, what else do we have on the schedule for the rest of the week? There's a lot of big ones set to report.
Yeah, there is. Tomorrow morning, there's actually quite a bit. Boeing is a huge we all know Boeing, right? With all their issues lately. They're going to be reporting tomorrow before open. That'll be an interesting one. Norwegian Cruise Lines, Kraft Heinz, CCJ, pretty big uranium stock there. Keep your eyes on that. MasterCard will be big. In after hours tomorrow, we have Meta, ARM, Qualcomm, Carvana. Just that is a pretty substantial lineup. Qualcomm and ARM were falling off the face of the earth today. Moderna on Thursday, Amazon, Apple, and Intel. Coinbase, DraftKings, Roku, Block in after hours Thursday. So that's the rundown heading towards the end of the week, Mike. And then, of course, we can't forget about Jerome Powell either.
True that, and we'll get to Jerome Powell in just a second, but we have to talk a little bit more about what's going on with CrowdStrike right now and how this one is truly falling off the face of the earth. So, as we all know by now, CrowdStrike had that biggest IT outage in history a couple weeks ago. And as you might expect, the situation is only getting worse for them. News came out today where Delta may seek damages for basically the problems that they incurred because of CrowdStrike. Delta is now in the process of handling over 176,000 refund requests, and this is happening after 7,000 flights were canceled just from Delta. If you're on the CrowdStrike team, obviously this news by itself is pretty concerning, but it's also even more concerning that Delta is surely not the only company that has suffered from this CrowdStrike outage. You can't help but think if Delta gets any compensation or anything from CrowdStrike, there's going to be a whole lot more companies lining up to get their fair share as well. But, as you can guess, CrowdStrike stock did not like this news at all, and selling pressure is hitting this one in a pretty strong way.
It really is, Mike. And let's go ahead and look at maybe how big this pullback has been from the high to the low. So we'll just say the high is right around 398, 400 there is what we're seeing on the daily chart. To the lows of today, we're seeing a pullback that's somewhere like right around 43% from highs. And this has all came essentially since just July 9th, guys. Within the past, what, Mike? Within the past, like, 21 days, we've seen this big of a pullback on this stock. This has been a huge revelation, Mike, and I'm kind of with you in thinking that how many other people are going to join in and start to sue them or obviously look to, do certain things in that type of sense. But it was interesting. They even went out and hired like a special attorney for this, right? I thought that was kind of funny. Even, they're bringing in the big boys, Mike, to take on CrowdStrike.
True that. But as we look at CrowdStrike, obviously the sentiment with this one is beyond horrible. And because of that, there's a lot of opportunities to continue to play this one in a bearish way going forward. But like Tom said, the stock is down a ton in a very short period of time. So it's like if the stock does start to show some signs of bouncing, you surely wouldn't want to fight against that direction. So it's like understand that like CrowdStrike, there's opportunities with it in the short term, but don't get caught holding the bag if the stock starts to change directions and pop back up. Because in stocks and in situations like this one, volatility is like extremely extremely pronounced, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, but I just wanted to throw that in there so no one gets caught off sides. But either way, Tom, you mentioned a couple minutes ago about the big man, Jerome Powell, and how he is set to speak tomorrow. Basically, tomorrow will be one of the most important days of the week as we have a crucial interest rate decision at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and then 30 minutes after that, at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Jerome Powell will speak. Right now, there's around a 96% chance that interest rates will stay exactly the same, so there's not really anything too worried about, anything you should be too worried about in that sense. What will be the most important thing for tomorrow is not only what Jerome Powell says when he speaks, but how he says it. If he if he words things in a way that induces fear and panic selling, the drops that we've seen in the short term will be nothing in comparison to what has happened in the past. Whereas if Jerome Powell does what he normally does in a very good way, where he just plays that perfect middle ground of saying what needs to be said while not inducing any extreme emotions on the bull side or the bear side, then on average, the market does tend to move up after events like this one. But either way, 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. are the times to watch for tomorrow. It's going to be one of the biggest days of the week.
Yeah, it definitely is. Anytime that Powell is speaking, let alone whenever we get an FOMC interest rate decision or obviously the Federal Reserve press conference where Powell speaks after, it's like the most important event usually of the week every time, right? It's hard to say that this week with all the earnings, right? Let me know in the comments what you think is going to be more influential for the market this week, all these earnings or Powell. Honestly, I think it'll be a pretty close vote, but nonetheless, I think Powell is going to be extremely important, Mike. I think that he needs to kind of lay out the pathway to show, hey, we are going to cut rates in September, right? We're actually not that far off from September now, I would say. So I'm definitely going to be looking for some indication of that. It could be pretty negative, though, if he says, like, hey, we might need to wait longer or something, right? You never know. Jerome Powell's pulled some wild stuff out of his hat before. So I'm definitely going to be watching the market very closely tomorrow, and I will be live actually for this event at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Go ahead and check us out on StockedUp Live. I will have this whole event live for a couple hours there until Jerome Powell is done speaking.
Sounds good. All right, Tom, as we look closer at SPY right now, today surely wasn't the best day, and tomorrow we have a big day ahead of us. So what are the key levels to watch?
Yeah, I've been talking about this range over the past couple days, and guess what we did? We stayed in it today. At market open, the SPY tried to run up, but it hit these resistances that we talked about all week long, right around 547 to 547.50, 548. We hit right around that range and, moved right back to the bottom of that range from the supports from last week. We started to base off around that 540 lower end of the support. So for tomorrow, I'm going to watch that recent low from last week around 538. That's going to be a a big level of support. I think if Powell and the earnings send us under that, it could start to get pretty bloody, as that is the recent low. As far as levels back to the upside, I'm watching 540 very closely where we are, 542, 544, 545.50, and then where we rejected today, which is very important, around 547 to 548. That's going to be a big level. But that's what we're watching, Mike. There's also a trend line that's been coming into play on SPY recently as well, bouncing right off of that. And with the earnings sending us down tonight, it's not the best confirmation to see, that's for sure.
No doubt. All right, well, let's get right into the good stuff then, which are some setups and predictions. A stock I'm watching very closely right now is NVIDIA. And this one took quite the beating today, as it is getting closer and closer to the key $100 support level. NVIDIA is a stock that has been leading the market over the past couple of years, and the trend is changing, Tom. We've seen this one pulling back in a very strong way over the past couple months, and when you see a day like today where the stock's down 7%, it definitely shakes out a lot of people who are owning or who own this stock. But as we look at NVIDIA in the short term, that $100 support is getting closer and closer. If we see, let's say, a bad Powell event tomorrow, and we see NVIDIA stock break through that $100 support, things can get very nasty with this one. But to be realistic, it's going to be hard to get to that level, and it's going to be even harder for the stock to break through it. So I'm not necessarily too confident that we're even going to see a test of $100 tomorrow, but if it happens, I want to make sure that this setup is on watch.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the biggest levels to look for. It's a big psychological level. And then, of course, we can back that up by looking at the Bookmap. And Bookmap can show that perfectly here, that $100 was huge. There was a ton of shares stacked up there today. Now, hey, if you're wondering, like, hey, Tom, why is it so blue on the left and then it's empty on the right? That's because this is after hours. And I wanted to show this because look at how it bounced right off of that key $100 level in after hours, and it didn't wipe out the buyers. You can see how it bounced right there, and the buyers are still sitting there stacked at 100. So just keep this level on watch. It's a very, very crucial level for this stock. And, Mike, anytime you have a stock at $100, it's like one of the most influential psychological levels you can have, almost besides like $1 or like $1,000 or, something like that. And, we've seen these stocks hitting $1,000 recently too, with how high in price a lot of them have been. But I'm definitely going to watch that very closely. And then, of course, that actually ties into my next play, which is QQQ as well. So I'm watching QQQ for a continuation to the downside. Today, I thought we broke under an amazing short-term trend, and I love the way we confirmed off of it and moved down today. I thought that was great. And we're also breaking below recent support. If we continue to see the market sell off tomorrow and SPY break support, and we see that selling pressure, I'll be looking for this to break below 452, and then I'll be looking for that continuation. That's right where the low is in after hours, and if that breaks, we'll probably be seeing SPY break support as well.
All right. Another stock I'm watching very closely for tomorrow is GLD, and this follows gold prices. A lot of times when we have crucial interest rate decisions, and of course, anytime Jerome Powell speaks, a lot of people look to gold for multiple different reasons. One, the way in which interest rates move have a pretty big direct impact on just gold and just a lot of things in general, but also the way in which Jerome Powell words his speech also has a big I guess you could say effect on the sentiment of market participants out there. If people are given a reason to maybe take profits on some stocks that they've been riding over the past couple years and, maybe shift that money into other areas of the market, a lot of times people do look at precious metals like gold, silver, and others as potential alternatives. So with that being said, GLD is close on my radar for tomorrow. And if we see, let's say, GLD start to move in a momentum-filled way at any point tomorrow, I think there will be a pretty good opportunity with it. But understand that this is not a play that is supposed to be, you could say, blindly bought right as the market opens. It's more so something that has to be monitored as the day goes by and, observed in how the momentum unfolds. But either way, GLD is on my radar to the upside.
Yeah, I like gold and silver in the short term. Just wait for the big money play in a minute, guys. You'll love it. But with the next one, I'm looking at UVXY. I'm looking at this to start to pop back to the upside a bit. Today, it was up 4.27% as the market pulled back. And over the past couple weeks, UVXY has actually been having some pretty good movement as the market's been pulling back a bit. So I'll be looking for this to continue to move to the upside in a pretty good way tomorrow. Now, again, this is going to kind of come down to how the earnings end up playing out in the morning. And then, of course, at the same time, Jerome Powell speaking later in the day will influence this a lot as well. But I'm really looking for SPY to just break that support tomorrow. If we start to break under those recent lows around 538, UVXY is definitely going to be on my radar with how much it moves. And the options on UVXY can go ballistic sometimes whenever the market drops, especially with volatility like we've been seeing lately.
Sounds good. All right, Tom. Well, let's get right into today's momentum plays. And with the first one, we have RTX to the upside. And Tom, I can't even remember we had RTX as a momentum play.
I know, right? They actually had earnings a few days ago. They've been running up like crazy in the short term, so I'm going to just look for a continuation there. If they break above 117, then keep watching them up. But it's normally a slower stock, but this after earnings move has been pretty awesome.
Sounds good. With the next one, we have SMCI to the downside.
Now, SMCI is not a slow stock, I can tell you that one. This one moves like crazy. It was down quite a bit today. It's popping back up in after hours. So if it breaks back under support around 655, then keep watching it down.
All right, and then with the last one, we have Goldman Sachs for both directions.
Yeah, ticker symbol GS. I don't know what's up with the banks, but they are killing it in the short term. If GS can break above 510, then watch it back to the upside. We were actually watching this one yesterday, and it had a great breakout today at open. And if it ends up pulling back under $500, then watch it back down.
All right, so we have that downside level for a potential move lower. We have the upside level for a potential move higher, and this is with Goldman Sachs. Don't forget about the downside level with SMCI, and then the upside level with RTX. Either way, these three stocks are on watch for potential day trades tomorrow, if and only if they break through the levels Tom listed. The stronger and more consistent these stocks move, the better the setups become. So keep them close on watch, and besides that, it's now about that time for today's $800,000 big money trade, and we are looking at ticker symbol SLV. SLV follows silver prices, so it's kind of tied with gold, and it tends to move in a similar way. But either way, the big money bought the $26.50 strike call options that expire on September 20th of 2024. Looking at this play right here, I've seen a handful of pretty bullish order flow today, not only with SLV, but also GDX, GLD, and SILJ, all of which are tied to precious metals and precious metals mining. Regardless, these stocks tend to move together, and it's also pretty interesting to see this flow come in right before the interest rate event for tomorrow. Of course, just because we're seeing bullish flow doesn't mean these stocks have to go up, but it's definitely something interesting and worth paying attention to. I do like how these call options are, slightly out of the money. They're not too far out of the money to the point where I'd get skeptical that they're a covered call, and they also have a decent amount of time to them. So either way, I think it's a very interesting setup. SLV, GLD, and just the precious metals area of the market has been uptrending in a very strong way over the past year or so. And over the past couple weeks, it has started to pull back a decent amount, but it's showing signs of actively improving, which, definitely, I guess you could say, instills more confidence that this recent price action is just a short-term dip. But I think we'll have much more clarity tomorrow after Powell.
Yeah, I think we definitely will too, and I'll definitely be watching metals very, very closely, Mike. I know you called out GLD as one of your plays earlier, so I'm definitely going to be watching gold very closely in the short term. It's going to be fun with the metals. I think that the fun thing is, like, when you go and you look at gold and silver, they've just been continually moving up off of these small dips all year long. And this is just another one of those very minor dips right now. We're kind of right in that spot where, we're set to start to break back to the upside, in my opinion. So, we have some big events going on. That could be exactly what we need to fuel another one of those tests of the recent highs, so to say. So I like this quite a bit, though, Mike, with SLV. It's a fun big money play. I know we had a big money play on SLV recently as well from July 2nd that expires in November. That one has a lot more time. This one expires in September, which is a little shorter term, but then again, it's still a play that will probably be held for multiple weeks.
There we go. But as we look at everything, it is an exciting time to be a trader. It is peak earnings season this week. We have Jerome Powell tomorrow. We have the market starting to heat up in a pretty exciting way, and this will ultimately make for a lot of opportunities in both directions for the short term, but it'll also bring upon a lot of great opportunities for the long term as well. For example, we've seen a handful of stocks start to sell off in pretty big ways that we haven't seen in at least a couple months. So for all of you out there who've been waiting to, buy some high quality companies at decent prices, maybe you'll get an opportunity soon. It depends on the valuation you're willing to pay. But even if you're not interested in, you could say, longer term holdings, this short term volatility will present a lot of great moves and opportunities in both directions, because when we see volatility increase, not only do we see crazier moves to the downside, but we also see some of the largest green days around those same times. And a prime example of that would be what actually happened during the COVID crash. And I know this is obviously like an extreme example, but the same pattern happens in every single volatile market event. When you see craziness to the downside, during those same times is when you see the biggest and strongest green/up days as well. So definitely be aware of that, not only for this week, but also over the next couple of weeks and months as the election gets closer and closer. If you guys are new to the channel, consider demolishing that subscribe button to get our videos recommended to you more often. It takes us hours to make these videos, and in every single video, we cover everything you have to know. We show charts you won't otherwise see anywhere else, big money trades, setups to pay attention to, and again, basically everything you have to know is shown in 20 to 25 minutes or less. So consider joining the Stocked Up crew by smashing that subscribe button. And before we close out, I want to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, which is David G in the Stocked Up trading floor. They had a pretty great screenshot today where he said, not bad for 30 seconds in and out. And he had a great trade with PayPal. So great snipe there, and hopefully we see many more screenshots like this one from you in the future. But keep on rolling. If you guys are new to the channel, again, make sure to subscribe. And besides that, let's have an amazing day in the market tomorrow.